Welcome to Kent Hance, the best storyteller in Texas. Make sure to like and subscribe to this podcast so you'll be notified when we release a new episode. Please follow us on social media too. You can find all of our handles on our website at beststorytellerpodcast.com. In this episode, Chancellor Hance is joined by the former Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Dr. Ben Carson. Dr. Carson shares with us how a TV game show made his decision for him to apply to Yale. Dr. Carson also tells us how a one-year fellowship in Western Australia prepared him to become the Chief of Pediatric Neurosurgery at Johns Hopkins at the age of 33. And when Chancellor Hance asked Dr. Carson why he thinks he went from being one of the 100 most admired persons in the world in 2012 to being left off the list completely, Chancellor Hance's answer may surprise you.
There's a highly successful businessman in Texas. He said, if the grass is greener on the other side, don't look. He said he looked one time and it just wasn't worth it. My guest today is Dr. Ben Carson, who was Secretary of HUD, Housing Urban Development, did a great job. And Dr. Carson, it's good to have you on my show.
It's wonderful to be here, be back in Lubbock again, and particularly at Texas Tech.
Well, we've enjoyed you visiting Lubbock before, and we've enjoyed you being at Texas Tech. You have an unusual background, and you've done a lot of things. And I think going back to your early childhood, you grew up. You were in Georgia and Tennessee, and then Boston and Detroit.
Yeah, well, my parents came from Harris County, Georgia, and Chattanooga, Tennessee. But I grew up in Detroit and Boston, and it was a relatively peaceful childhood until I was 8, when my parents got divorced. My mother discovered that my father was a bigamist. And she had less than a third-grade education, so it was very difficult at that point. We eventually found a place to live with her older sister and brother-in-law in Boston. In a typical tenement, all the things that you see on TV, the rats and the roaches and the sirens and the gangs and the broken glass, it was all there. And my mother was working extremely hard as a domestic, 2-3 jobs at a time. Sometimes we would only see her on the weekends. But one of the things that she learned by working as a domestic and cleaning other people's houses is that successful people don't sit around and watch TV all day. They have a tendency to read and to study, and so she came home and imposed that on me and my brother. We were not very happy. We were terrible students. I mean, the worst students that you could imagine. I was what's known as the safety net. No one ever had to worry about getting the lowest mark on a test as long as I was there.
As long as you were in the class?
But she made us read those books and give her written book reports, which she couldn't read, but we didn't know that. And as I started reading about scientists and entrepreneurs and explorers, and I began to recognize that the person who had the most to do with what happened to you in life is you. It's not somebody else. It's not the environment. I stopped listening to all the purveyors of negativity and victimhood. And I said, well, you can believe that if you want, but you know, this is what I'm going to do.
But you did. You took a positive attitude.
I took a positive attitude. I started thinking about what I could do, not what I couldn't do. And same thing for my brother.
One of the things, you talked about your mom really couldn't read that much, but she really demanded that y'all read and give a book report.
Right. Well, she had enough wisdom to recognize that education was your ticket. And if you made yourself valuable, you were going to do okay, no matter what the other external situations may be. And unfortunately, there's so many people today who are falling victim to victimhood. If you think you're a victim, you are a victim. And they listen to the people who say, these people are against you and the system is against you and you can't possibly succeed unless I help you. And, you know, it's just a bunch of garbage, to be honest with you.
Right.
This is America. And, you know, those people who say that everything harkens back to 1619 and critical race theory and racism throughout the system, you know, they have obviously not read or experienced what's happened in this country in the last 50 years. It's a completely different country. It's very different than when I was growing up. And opportunities abound. And, you know, you have, you know, black mayors of cities, CEOs of major corporations. You know, if you want to be a victim, you can be, but you don't have to be. And, you know, we need to move on. And, you know, there's so much emphasis now on anything that divides people, be it race, religion, age, income. It doesn't matter, gender. You know, you want to divide people. Why? Because for some, it gives them a power base. And make everybody into a victim and you the savior. And you got
You're
power.
on top.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you tell this group and get them to fight and say, hey, let me solve your problems.
Exactly.
Yeah, you see that all the time. Your grades improved once your mother started making you read more and everything.
Yeah, I went from the bottom of the class to the top of the class in about a year and a half. All the students who were teasing me about being a dummy before were now coming to me saying, Benny, how do you work this problem? Yeah. And I'd say, sit at my feet, youngster, while I instruct you. I was probably a little turkey in a little bit. It sure felt good to say that to them.
Yeah, you were at the top, not at the bottom. Now, you went to Yale.
Yes.
And you narrowed it down. You were looking at Harvard and Yale, and tell that story. I think this is good.
I had enough money to apply to one school, and one of my favorite TV programs, we could only watch 2 or 3 TV programs a week, was called GE College Bowl.
Sure, I remember it well.
Yes, and they would have 4 contestants on each side, and they would ask questions about science and math and history and geography and all this stuff, and I was really good at all that stuff.
You could answer the question.
I could answer the question, but then they would also ask questions about classical art and classical music, and I didn't know any of that stuff, so I started to teach myself. I started going downtown to the Detroit Institute of Arts day after day, roaming through those galleries until I knew who painted every picture, what period it represented, always listening to my portable radio, Bach, Telemann, Mozart. Kids thought I was nuts, a black kid in Motown listening to Mozart. But, you know, I was getting myself ready because I wanted to be a contestant on GE College Bowl.
Sure.
But the year I went to college was the year it went off the air. But I even made my decision about which college it would be. I said, I'm going to apply to the college that wins the grand championship in College Bowl. And that year, the grand championship was between Harvard and Yale. And Yale demolished Harvard, so I didn't want to go to the school with a bunch of dummies, so I applied to Yale. Unfortunately, they accepted me with a scholarship. And, you know, it turned out to be, in those days, you know, a lot of the schools weren't as radically winged in one direction or the other, and you could really get a much more balanced education.
Yeah, they were trying to make sure that you got a great base and foundation in education to help you throughout life. Yeah, and you got that, and then you applied to medical school. You went to University of Michigan.
That's correct. And
why Michigan? Because it's your home state? Because
I was from Michigan. And obviously you pay Michigan rates if you're a Michigan resident.
Right, so it's cheaper.
Much less expensive. But it also turns out it was one of the top 10 medical schools, so that was an added bonus.
Right.
And, you know, when I went there, I was planning on becoming a psychiatrist. It turned out that Michigan had a particularly strong neuroscience department and a very strong neurosurgical program. And I started getting attracted to neurosurgery. And a lot of people said, well, that's a very strange thing, because at that time there had only been 8 black neurosurgeons in the world.
And this was what year?
That was 1973.
And so there had only been 8
black neurosurgeons in the world.
Wow.
At that time. But, you know, God does not distribute talent on the basis of race. And, you know, I kind of took to neurosurgery like a duck to water. And, you know, the chairman of the neurosurgery department there said, you want to stay here after medical school in our program, you got a spot. But, you know, I moved on to Johns Hopkins, because Hopkins is sort of like the modern birthplace of neurosurgery.
Right.
All the biggest names. And fortunately, you know, they accepted me. And, you know, residency went very well. I went off to Australia. Did a 1-year fellowship as the senior registrar there. Came back and the position opened up for director of pediatric neurosurgery. And I was very young at the time. Normally they go out and get somebody with a lot of gray hair and a big name, but everybody said, well, Carson's very young, but he can do everything, because when I was in Australia that 1 year, there were only 4 neurosurgical consultants in all of Western Australia.
Wow.
And once they discovered that I knew how to operate, you know, they spent a lot of time at the private hospitals and left me to do a lot of the major work at the major teaching hospitals. So I was doing 3 or 4 craniotomies every day of really complex stuff. And if I had stayed on at Hopkins as a junior faculty member, I would have gotten what everybody else didn't want to do. Here I was doing creme de la creme cases, one after another, for a whole year. So when I came back, you know, my skill levels were elevated significantly.
Sure.
So I became the chief of pediatric neurosurgery at age 33. Most people haven't even finished their residency by that time. And through the grace of the good Lord, had just an amazing career with all kinds of firsts and imaginative cases.
You know, one of the things I look at, in 2012, you were named by CNN as one of the 100 most admired persons in the world. Mm-hmm. And I mean, that's great. But after you got in politics, you know, they left you off the list.
Oh, they hate you once. Once they know you're a conservative, particularly if you're a black conservative. For the left, the only thing worse than Satan is a black conservative, because it shoots holes in, you know, all their propaganda, and they don't need you out there with saying, you know, you can make it, and, you know, work hard and you know, establish it. They want to say you're a victim and the system is against you, and they got their foot on your neck and you can't make it and you need me.
Well, you certainly have proven that you can do anything. Absolutely. And you've been great at everything you've done. You had some difficult cases.
Some extraordinarily difficult cases. And you know, one of the things that we did is we brought back cerebral hemispherectomy, an operation where you take out half of the brain in children with intractable seizures that are focused in one side of the brain. And that operation had fallen out of favor because of the high morbidity and mortality. And we were able to figure out a way to do it that did not kill or maim people. And, you know, I was privileged to do the first intrauterine shunning procedure on...
You operated on a fetus?
On the baby
in the womb?
While it was still in the mother's womb.
Wow.
And we were ostensibly trying to save the normal twin. But it turned out we were able to save both twins. And that was quite a newsmaker. And then I started doing the conjoined twins. I did several cases of conjoined twin surgery. We're doing brainstem tumors and, you know, a host of things. But I just feel very privileged to have been at a location like Johns Hopkins, where I had a lot of fantastic colleagues, a lot of good consultations, and, you know, the ability to pray. I prayed before cases with the families and with the staff.
So before you go in and operate on someone, like even the baby in the womb, you'd pray with the mother, the father, the family?
Sure. In cases where they wanted to. I never forced it on anybody.
And then you pray with the staff that wanted to.
Yeah, exactly.
That doesn't happen very often.
No, it doesn't. And, you know, Jesus is the master physician. And he can give you the wisdom that you need. But he can give you the wisdom you need in everything. You know, and that's what we need in this country right now. We need not forget about our Judeo-Christian foundation. And that's what, you know, America...
Which was the basis, the foundation of the country.
Absolutely. And, you know, we knew how to treat each other. And now we don't seem to know anymore how to treat each other. We're going to hurt people who don't agree with you.
Mr. Secretary, when I went to Congress in the 70s and 80s, I didn't hate anyone. I didn't know any members that hated anyone. But now, if you ask a congressman if he hates somebody, you almost have to pull up a chair. You know, it's going to be a long list.
Unfortunately.
And that's not good. It's not good for the country. It's not good for either party or philosophy.
You know, Jesus said it first, and it was echoed by Abraham Lincoln. A house divided against itself cannot stand.
Yeah.
And, you know, the United States of America is an amazing place. A very strong country. We can't be brought down by Russia or China or North Korea or Iran, but we can be brought down from within by ourselves. And you're seeing that materialize in front of your face today.
Everywhere you look, there's major conflict.
Right. You know, defund the police, hate your neighbor, let's not have any borders, let's disregard the rules that we don't believe in, let's create chaos, let's rewrite our history. Yeah, I mean, it's just, it's almost like, what can we do to destroy this nation?
Yeah, like they get together and say, what can we do to, you know, that will have a bad impact? And that's, okay, let's do that.
Yeah.
And it will have a bad impact. Yeah. You have started a new institute, American Cornerstone Institute. Explain to listeners, you know, what that does and what it'll be doing, what your goal is.
Well, recognize that America went from a ragtag bunch of militiamen to the pinnacle power in the world in record time. And how did that happen? It was because of our foundational cornerstone principles that we followed. And recognizing that we were going off the cliff, you know, I could not retire. I said, we got to do something about this. And fortunately, several of the very best people at HUD came with me to this endeavor to look at the 4 cornerstone principles upon which our nation was built. Number 1 being faith, and that Judeo-Christian faith taught us how to relate to our neighbor. It says, love your neighbor. You forgive people. You help less fortunate. If we get rid of that principle, it's got to be replaced with something else. And what it's being replaced with is not good. It says, hate your neighbor. It says, cancel your neighbor. It says, make your neighbor's life very difficult if they don't agree with you. That is totally antithetical to our founding principles and who we are as a nation. And then the second cornerstone is liberty. The very reason that people came to this nation from around the world was because they were offered an opportunity to live the life that they wanted to live and to live it the way they wanted to live. Not having other people telling you who, what, when, and where you could do stuff. And, you know, we had freedom of expression. You didn't have to worry if you said something bad about the king that you were going to get your head cut off. And some people say, well, you know, we still have freedom of expression and freedom in this country. The government's not stopping you. Well, I beg to differ, because the big tech and the media, through political correctness on steroids, has gone wild, and people are very afraid to express themselves, and it can result in terrible consequences. and the government is complicit. So the impact is every bit as significant as loss of freedom of speech in countries that people were trying to get out of. And obviously, we have to alert people to what's going on and what the impact of it is. The third cornerstone being community. One of the reasons we were able to develop so quickly and flourish is because we had communities. They were scattered all over the country, in many cases 50 miles away from anybody else. But people helped each other. They used their collective skills together to develop. You know, if it was harvest time and a farmer broke his leg, everybody else harvested his crops for him.
Sure.
You know, they didn't ask him what his political persuasion was. And that gave us strength as a nation. Now we've degenerated to the point where that person who's been living peacefully across the street from you for 20 years is now your enemy because they have a different yard sign. Yeah. And we allow the politicians and the media to encourage that kind of attitude. We're not like that naturally. And then the last cornerstone is life. You know, there was a time when we had tremendous respect for life, from the womb to the tomb. And as we've gotten away from respecting what that baby is in the mother's womb, as we've gotten away from caring about the mentally ill who are struggling on the streets and the drug addicts who are struggling on the street, we've become more callous and coarse in our attitudes toward each other, all of which is having a very negative impact on our nation. So we're looking at all of those things. We're working on all those things. We're talking about all of those things. We'll be doing town halls and roundtables around the country with local people and local media so that we can begin the discussion about these things, placing the facts on the table. We don't care where people are coming from. We just want them to know that we're going to solve these things based on the facts and the evidence, not on ideology and political opinion.
Right. And not on what someone wants it to be.
Right.
The facts, you know, and as an attorney, I've tried lawsuits, and the facts are the facts.
Exactly. You don't get to manufacture the facts.
Yeah. But too many times in this day and time, people report on something, they want to manufacture the facts to go with what they want to be, and that's just not the way it is.
And the other thing that we're doing is working with a lot of smaller local groups who have had very good ideals but don't have a voice, and to be able to give them a voice.
Right. But summing up, just briefly, the four cornerstones
would be faith, would be liberty, community, and life.
Faith, liberty, community, and life.
Absolutely.
Pretty good foundation.
You can build the rest of America on those four cornerstones.
And treating your fellow man, that you respect their faith, their liberty, there are rules and there's laws, and we stay with those. Right. And you adhere to them.
And we're not each other's enemies.
That's right.
And you know, the quicker we realize that, the less likely we are to fall prey to those who are trying to divide us.
Right. Well, Dr. Carson, I appreciate you being in Lubbock, appreciate you visiting with us. And I didn't even get into, as you were Secretary of HUD, you did a lot, and you did a lot to help in housing. You had a great team.
We changed the philosophy of success. Instead of success being the number of people you could get into a government program, it was the number of people you could get out of the program in a state of self-sufficiency.
Right. And I always thought that was good. I heard you early on speak about that.
Yeah.
You want to help people get out of a government program, get into being self-sufficient.
And realize the American dream.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And excel in all.
Yep. That's America for you. America is not a place. America is an idea.
It's an idea that is a great idea. We need to make sure that we
preserve
it and comply with it.
Amen.
Mr. Secretary, Great to have you here. Great to have you on the show, and great to have you in Lubbock, Texas, and visiting the entire state of Texas for a few days.
I love Texas because there's a lot of people with common sense here.
That's right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.